top 1% elite dark chosen ones use this hack to jump multiple shadow dimensions. There's a point in your journey when you stop playing by the rules of the visible world. You realize the real game isn't happening in front of your eyes. It's unfolding behind your perception. This is the moment when you begin to feel the edges of something deeper, something layered beneath what most people call real. And if you're hearing this now, if your body is already vibrating before I even finish this sentence, you're not just curious, you're remembering. That's the first sign. You're remembering what the world told you to forget, that you are a dark chosen one, and the 1% of us who embody this path don't just live in one version of reality, we jump them, we move through multiple shadow dimensions like breath. We don't just influence outcomes, we bend timelines. But we do it in a way that most people will never see, and even fewer will ever understand. You see, at some point we stopped believing in the rigid laws of this dimension. We stopped thinking time was linear. We stopped assuming space was fixed. We stopped worshipping logic as the highest authority, and that's when it began. The glitch, the sacred glitch. That moment when you say something and it manifests within hours. When you think of someone and they call. When you feel the future arriving in your chest before it reaches your calendar. These aren't coincidences. These are symptoms of dimensional bleed-through. You're not living in one timeline, you're brushing against many. And when your frequency sharpens, you begin to choose which one you enter. That's the hack. But it's not a trick. It's a discipline, a remembrance, an ancient technology hidden in your consciousness, waiting to be reactivated.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The hack is not a button you press, it's a frequency you become. The elite dark chosen ones know this. They don't chase power, they tune into it. They don't force reality, they sync with it. They understand that shadow dimensions are not evil, they're mirrors. Realms built upon unresolved frequencies, collective wounds, ancestral memories and soul contracts that never got completed. Every shadow dimension you enter is a realm of potential and distortion. If you enter unconsciously, you get trapped in its loops. If you enter consciously, you can recode it. So, how does the hack work? Let's go deeper. The first step is detachment from consensus reality. That means you must train yourself to stop assuming that what you see is the full truth. Most people are addicted to sensory validation. They only believe what their five senses confirm. But the dark chosen ones know how to feel beyond the veil. They know the moment a familiar pattern arises, it's not just psychology, it's a dimensional signal. For example, if you find yourself repeating toxic relationships, cycles of self-sabotage, or sudden waves of inexplicable emotion, you're not just stuck. You're being invited into a shadow dimension. The loop is the portal, and the way out, conscious interruption. You hack the loop by disrupting its ritual. That means you must do something radically uncharacteristic at the exact moment you feel the pattern activating. If you always shut down, speak out. If you always chase, let go. If you always explain, go silent. This single act of micro-rebellion sends a shockwave through that dimension. It tells the Matrix, you're no longer playing by the script, and when you do this with clarity and conviction, the dimension begins to collapse. That version of reality loses its grip on you. And then something wild happens. You feel a shift in your body, a lightness, a clarity, a sense of expansion that wasn't there before. That's the jump, but here's where it gets even more advanced. The elite don't just wait for these moments, they create them. They use ritual, meditation, breath work, silence, and energy movement to intentionally weaken the grip of stagnant timelines. They speak codes aloud in solitude. They write in sigils, not sentences. They walk into places with the awareness that they are not just entering a room, they are entering an energetic battlefield. Every time they speak, they calibrate reality. Every time they move, they shift the grid. These are not metaphors. This is literal multidimensional warfare, and it's not about violence. It's about vibration. You've probably felt this already. You're in a conversation and suddenly you feel like you're not in the same reality as the person talking to you. Your body stiffens, your breath shortens, a part of you screams, "This isn't real." That's not anxiety. That's your soul alerting you that you've slid into a shadow thread. And in that moment you have a choice. Do you play along or do you shift the frequency? The top 1% never play along. They transmute. They speak truth into distortion. They drop silence into noise. They pull presence into patterns. And by doing so, they overwrite the dimension. They don't argue. They don't convince. They simply exist in such a high level of coherence that the shadow cannot maintain its structure. The lie collapses, the illusion breaks. And what remains is a doorway, a portal into a higher, clearer, more aligned timeline. Now here's the deeper wisdom. You cannot jump dimensions from ego. You can't do it to escape pain or to feel superior. The shadow detects intent. If your motive is fear or control, the dimension will feed on you. But if your motive is alignment, truth, liberation, then the dimension will bend for you. Because shadow dimensions aren't enemies. They are teachers. They are karmic classrooms. And when you walk through them with awareness, you don't just graduate, you master reality. So, let me ask you something you may have never dared to ask yourself. What if the pain you've been avoiding is actually the invitation to your next dimension? What if the pattern isn't punishment, but a portal? And what if your ability to shift it, right now, is the very reason you were chosen? Because you were chosen, and the shadow knows it. The question is, do you? The frequency codes, how to lock into quantum paths the matrix can't track. Let's go deeper now, because the moment you understand that shadow dimensions aren't cages but corridors, you stop fearing them. You begin to realize that the jump isn't about escaping anything. It's about aligning with something so precise, so authentic, so vibrationally accurate that every false world collapses around you. And to do that, you need to learn the ancient, invisible art of frequency coding. This is where the elite 1% of dark chosen ones live. This is where the real power begins, not in what you do, but in what you carry. Not in what you say, but in what you transmit. Frequency codes are not spells. They are not affirmations. They are states of being. Think of them like keys, but not made of metal, made of energy, memory, and intention. Every frequency you embody has a signature, and every shadow dimension has a vibrational lock. If your frequency doesn't match the lock, you stay stuck in the loop. But if you shift your state, your thoughts, your breath, your posture, your silence, you change your code. And when the code matches the lock, the door opens. the dimension collapses, you jump. Now here's what most people miss. You're not just reacting to life, you are constantly broadcasting a frequency. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you indulge, every belief you reinforce, it's all feeding into your signal. And that signal is like a beacon. It calls in quantum timelines that match it. That's why when you're in a state of fear, everything around you seems to reinforce that fear. It's not a coincidence, it's a magnetic loop. But the elite understand how to interrupt that loop by changing their internal signal first. So how do they do it? First, they disconnect from the noise. They know the matrix feeds on attention. Algorithms, media, opinions, distractions, they're not just information, they're frequencies. The moment you let them in without discernment, you begin to lose access to your own signal. That's why the elite spend more time in silence than in stimulation. They meditate not to feel good, but to tune. They fast, not just from food, but from noise, from people, from dopamine loops. Because when you strip all that away, what's left is signal, pure, undistorted signal. From that place, you can begin to code. Next, they speak in alignment. Every word you speak is a spell, but more than that, it's a creation command. When you speak from fear, you summon fear-based timelines. When you speak from truth, even if your voice shakes, you summon quantum doors that only open through authenticity. That's why the elite don't waste words. They don't talk to be heard, they speak to alter the field. Even a single sentence, when aligned with soul, can shatter illusion. That's frequency coding in motion. But the most advanced level? It's not what you say, it's how you exist. The elite walk through the world with a kind of stillness that rattles the unseen. They don't need to announce their power because their presence is the announcement. They've learned to stabilize their energy in such a way that even chaos bends around them. They don't chase opportunities, they calibrate to timelines where opportunities chase them. They don't force outcomes, they become so aligned with their path that timelines self-organize around them. That's not magic, that's quantum architecture. And here lies the secret. The matrix can't track authenticity. It can track ego, fear, greed, validation seeking, but not soul. When you operate from soul, you become untraceable. You become invisible to the systems built to control you. You slip through the cracks of predictable behavior. You no longer feed the simulation. You begin to rewrite it. That's why elite, dark, chosen ones are often underestimated, even overlooked, until they suddenly shift everything around them with a single move that no one saw coming. Because while others were performing, they were coding. Quietly, precisely, relentless. So, how do you begin to apply this in your life? Start with emotional awareness. Every emotion carries a frequency. When you feel anger, fear, shame, pause. Don't suppress it, don't indulge it, decode it. Ask, what is this emotion pointing me toward? What pattern is it echoing? What timeline is it binding me to? Then shift, not by pretending everything is fine, but by acting from a higher truth. Maybe that means breathing deeper. Maybe it means walking away. Maybe it means doing the exact opposite of what your trauma wants you to do. That's a frequency shift. That's a code rewrite. Then create anchors. These are practices or environments that stabilize your new signal. It could be a sacred space, a scent, a mantra, a breath pattern, a movement. Every time you engage with that anchor, you're reinforcing your chosen frequency. And as you do, you'll notice reality begins to reflect it. Not instantly, but inevitably. The loops begin to weaken. The shadows start dissolving. Synchronicities accelerate. You'll feel it. The field around you will start responding like a living organism, because it is. And finally, ask yourself the question most never dare to ask: what version of me is already living the life I desire in another dimension? What does that version believe, feel, choose? How do they walk, speak, rest, create now? Become that version, not tomorrow, now. Embody their frequency. Step into alignment so radically that your current timeline has no choice but to upgrade to match you. That's the code. That's the path. That's how you become the signal that the Matrix can't predict, can't trap, can't replicate. You don't need to escape this world. You just need to vibrate beyond its reach. The shadow jump, unlocking the dimensional veins hidden inside emotional pain. By now, you've probably started to sense it, not just intellectually, but physically. The pull, the tension, the undeniable magnetic force of emotional pain. The world has trained you to run from it, to numb it, to medicate or spiritualize it away. But the elite, dark, chosen ones, those operating in the top 1% of spiritual intelligence, know better. We know pain is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. It's the hidden architecture of shadow dimensions. And when you learn to hold it, feel it, and decode it, pain becomes a portal. It becomes the very map that leads you to the next dimension. The jump is never away from the pain, it's through it. Every shadow dimension you've ever visited, whether in a toxic relationship, a repeating life pattern, or an internal war with yourself, was built around an unresolved emotional frequency. These frequencies are not random, they are ancient. Some are inherited through bloodlines, others are karmic echoes from other lifetimes. Each one is a vein of energy that runs deep through your psyche, and if you trace it, follow it, sit with it long enough without trying to fix it, you'll find something extraordinary. A dimensional gate. That's right, inside the emotion itself, especially the ones you most avoid, is a frequency so potent, so exact, that it holds the key to a completely different version of reality. But here's the paradox. The door will not open if you approach it like a victim. It will not respond to blame, avoidance, or even spiritual bypassing. The shadow jump only activates when you choose to feel with precision. That means becoming radically honest about what's alive inside you, even if it's ugly, even if it's inconvenient. You don't just feel sadness, you enter it, as if it were a room. You don't just analyze anger, you become aware of where it lives in your body. You let it speak to you in its own language. And the moment you stop resisting it, the moment you breathe into it instead of trying to transcend it, everything changes. Because here's the truth. Emotional pain is a time capsule. It carries the resonance of the dimension it originated from. When you feel it fully, without judgment, you begin to unlock that trapped dimension, and with it, all the versions of you still stuck there. That's the real work. The elite don't just heal, they retrieve. They go into the shadow realms armed with frequency, and they bring back lost aspects of themselves. They don't deny their darkness, they mine it, because inside each fragment of pain is pure, unclaimed power. Not power over others, but power over reality itself. Most people never get this far. They stop at the trigger, they personalize the pain. Why is this happening to me? But the elite ask a different question. What version of me lives beyond this pain? And then they sit with that question in stillness, letting the energy of the answer rearrange their cells. That's the jump. It's not dramatic, it's quantum. It happens in silence, in surrender, in the exact moment that you stop fighting the emotion and start listening to it. And once you've made this kind of jump, even once, you can never go back to sleep. You'll begin to crave the friction, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you know now that inside every difficult emotion is a map to your next level. You'll stop fearing the collapse of old patterns because you'll recognize the exact moment when a shadow reality is about to break. You'll feel it in your bones. The air changes, the light bends, synchronicities speed up, the illusion starts to glitch. And if you're conscious enough, you'll ride that wave right into a new reality, leaving behind the debris of an outdated self. So ask yourself now with fearless honesty, what emotion have I been avoiding that holds the key to my next evolution? What memory, what wound, what ache in my chest have I refused to sit with, not knowing that it's the very dimensional gate I've been begging to find? Because when you finally sit with it, when you finally feel it without needing to fix it, you'll realize something that the top 1% already live by. Pain isn't the enemy, it's the compass. And the shadow? It was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to deliver you. The final override, becoming the glitch that rewrites the simulation from the inside out, is the moment where everything changes. When you've walked through enough shadow dimensions, decoded enough emotional loops, and remembered enough of who you really are, you stop trying to fix the simulation. You begin to override it. Not from rebellion, not from ego, but from a place so rooted in soul that even the fabric of reality starts to respond differently to your presence. This is where the top 1% of dark chosen ones truly separate from the rest. Not because they seek power, but because they become the glitch, the untraceable anomaly, the sovereign signal that no matrix, no algorithm, no construct can predict or contain. To override the simulation, you must first understand something most never will. Your reality is a mirror, not a law. It isn't fixed. It isn't external. It's reflective. And once you realize that the simulation feeds off your unconscious responses, you begin to shift the entire game by simply not reacting the way it expects you to. When you're triggered, but don't collapse into the old story. When you're afraid, but choose expansion anyway. When you're doubted, but remain unmoved. That's when the override begins, the script breaks, the timeline glitches, the code scrambles, and suddenly, you're no longer inside a program, you're reprogramming it. But overriding isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign. You feel everything, but nothing owns you. You observe the loop trying to pull you in, and instead of fighting it, you dissolve it. You don't need to explain yourself to the simulation, you simply stop feeding it your energy. You stop buying into the illusion that your validation or safety exists outside of you. You stop trying to be palatable, understandable, or even relatable, and in doing so you become profoundly unpredictable. That's the highest form of power in a controlled system. Unpredictability born from alignment. And alignment at this level looks like contradiction to the untrained eye. You speak softly with fire behind your words. You walk humbly with galaxies in your chest. You smile while 1,000 dimensions rearrange behind your gaze. People won't understand you. They'll project. They'll question. They'll try to decode you with tools that only work on the asleep. But you won't flinch, because you've become the glitch. The anomaly that triggers awakening in others just by existing fully. You're no longer a seeker, you're a signal. This is where you become dangerous, not to others, but to the systems that depend on your unconsciousness. You don't need to tear anything down. Your presence alone destabilizes what is false. You walk through rooms and the field begins to shift. People confront parts of themselves they've buried for years. Timelines collapse around you. Others feel exposed without understanding why. That's not because you're superior, it's because you're clear. And clarity, in a world built on distortion, is the most disruptive force there is. So what does life look like when you live from this place? It's not always easy. You'll lose people, you'll outgrow spaces, you'll be accused of changing, of becoming distant, intense, or too much. But you'll also gain something sacred, freedom. Not the kind that's loud or performative, the kind that's quiet, internal, and unshakable. The kind that allows you to move through the world with nothing to prove, nothing to defend, and nothing to check. Because you're not here to survive the simulation, you're here to rewrite it. And the most beautiful part? You don't need permission, you don't need a certificate or a title or a following, you don't need a perfect past or a flawless record. You just need to choose, right now, to embody the frequency of the version of you who already remembers, already knows, already is. Because once you become that version, everything around you recalibrates, reality updates, the simulation glitches, and the path unfolds not because you forced it, but because you became the override. So I'll ask you now one last time. If you stop trying to be understood, liked, or accepted, what would you become? What version of you is waiting behind the last illusion you still believe about yourself? Let go, let it collapse, let it rewrite. You're not here to fit in, you're here to bend reality. And now you know how.